Hey everyone, welcome back to OTD Military History. Great to be covering an event on the 80th anniversary of it occurring, which is very exciting because you don't always get to do this on the exact days. So this is pretty cool. So today we're going to be talking about Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. Very interesting campaign. I've covered it in many ways, different formats with Project 44. I did a lecture for the Canadian Forces College in Toronto on it. Which I'm going to be taking some stuff from that today to talk about this. Just a quick overview. I had some questions from a patron that I'm going to talk about in a bit. And of course, if you have questions, anything like that, sidebar is the way to go. Questions, anything you want me to talk about. If you want some of my opinions on stuff, that's cool too. Always willing to discuss that stuff and give you my opinions. And this is just really my thoughts alone, obviously, and kind of my experience in studying this stuff and trying to make it as based on primary sources as possible, as I always try to do, especially moving forward, really trying to embrace that as my philosophy for the channel, for everything I'm kind of doing on here. So that's kind of what I'm trying to think about for the future for the channel as well. So with that said, I'm just going to pull up, I really think it's a really good map because I've been looking for maps of the Sicily campaign a lot lately because I just released a video. Alex was talking about it a bit in the sidebar there. Released it yesterday. It's linked down below so you can check it out afterwards. Just taking some primary accounts from around the time of the invasion and some from several years later about some soldiers and some sailors and soldiers who was there. And if you're trying to post a link in the sidebar, it won't work. They don't work in the sidebar. Maybe if you want to send it to me, I can check it out and then post it later down below. But it won't work in the sidebar. I think only I can do that, as far as I remember. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Anyway, so just let me pull it up here. This is a really good one. I can't remember the source exactly. I think it's a Canadian map. I think it's from the original I don't know what to call it, like the short booklet on Canada and Italy that was initially released before the official history. I think it's from that one, done by the historical section of the Army, Canadian Army. And why I like it is because it lays it out pretty clearly of kind of what we're dealing with here when it comes to, Husky, the opening stages. Obviously, he doesn't have a naval. It is in the official history. I thought so. I couldn't remember if it was that one. Whatever. It's an official Army, Canadian Army map. I think it's not marked at the bottom. I may have got cut off. Anyway, doesn't matter. So what it shows is the green is American forces. The solid red is Canadians. And then the dashed red are British units. So it kind of lays out all of it. This is why I really like it, because you get a sense of everything in one scope, because Sicily obviously has a lot going on because you have the different landings, right? You have the American landings of the 7th Army over here more towards the west, kind of based around Gela. And then the Canadians are landing down here outside Pachino. And then the British landings, and this is all 8th Army under Montgomery, with the 1st Canadian Division is attached to for the first time in the war. And also this is the first experience for the 1st Division, which had not been Norman, sorry. As you guys know, I get sometimes distracted by the cyber comments and they make me laugh, which we'll get to in a second. But yes, you can see the different elements here landing, as well as the airborne elements that don't go great, which comes up quite a lot because the airborne elements are, sorry, Wayne, I know which one you're talking about. Yep. I worked a little bit with them on that one to get it part of the social media, which I will check on theirs after. I made sure that was included in their social media outputs for today for the RCR. So if you're on any of, I think they're Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, I work with them on their OTD posts. Shocking. That's me on some of them, most of a good chunk of them. Anyway, so yeah, lots of Sicily stuff today. And yes, the weather in Ottawa is sticky again. It is lovely. Anyway, so want to talk about the airborne landings really quick. They don't go well. They're scattered because they technically take place on the 9th. very late on the 9th and into the early hours of the 10th. Lots of issues with navigation, all that stuff. So the British have issues with the gliders coming in. They're off course. Most of them don't make it. A lot of them get dumped into the sea, which causes huge casualties. And then later on, there's a reinforcement drop in the American sector, and I talked about that in the video. It takes a lot of friendly fire. I mean, it's intense, and as I mentioned in the video, that's why you have the invasion stripes that you see in Normandy, because the U.S. Navy just lights up anything they see. I included one account of that from an LST. It wasn't the only one I found. I was trying to keep the video around 10 minutes. That's why some things I didn't get to include that I may have wanted to. Yeah, so that's it is from the overall one. Yes, see, here we are going crazy here trying to remember it. It is from the overall official history, not one of the ones that breaks it down. The earliest edition of the official history, which is then broken down into 3 volumes, because they like to make the Canadian official histories as difficult as possible. Yes, and no, there were no Canadians in the airborne drops, Phil. These are British and American units. I mean, there's probably some Canadians, maybe individuals scattered throughout, maybe. I don't know for sure, but no Canadian units per se. And there's no Kamloops, so not yet. So you have an issue with airborne going off course. That causes some problems in the American sector, primarily what I want to talk about first, because that's what I covered in the video. That counterattack that you have later on with Italian and German armor hitting outside of Gela. And you can see on the map this little circle where it's supposed to be. Maybe we can talk about it a bit later, but I talk about that counterattack from a battalion commander who was there. So it was really interesting to get his account. I think it's from kind of like Staff College after the war, but it's fairly detailed and everything like that, remembering individual actions and taking out individual tanks and things like that, and how they were able to stop that counterattack, which got extremely close to Gela itself. I've read in counts, it's 100 yards within sight of the beach, maybe on the beach itself, 100 yards from the shore potentially. So it's a really intense counterattack and leads to all kinds of changes and thoughts about, how to support amphibious operations, what that means for armor, all kinds of stuff. And one thing that I'm surprised nobody asked about yet is Operation Mincemeat, right? The deception campaign about making the Axis think that the attack is potentially going to be Sardinia or in Greece. Or Corsica instead of Sicily. So it's a really interesting one about looking at that. I mean, I don't put too much stock into that as being like this war-winning thing because it wasn't. The war's not won in Sicily by any stretch of the imagination. And I've seen some people make the argument that if there had been more armor, say German armor particularly, in Sicily, they could have counterattacked with it and then just got blown to pieces, like the counterattacks that happened outside Gela, which is what stops them, basically, is individual actions, but the majority of it is seaborne fire. Only imagine what that would do to massed armored columns, right? It would just blow them up with reinforcements that the Germans could not provide. So that would have been really, really interesting. Yeah, so I mean, that's... mincemeat, some think it worked. I don't really think so. I mean, it's rather over the top. The movie was not great because I know what's on Netflix, so a lot of people watched it. I mean, the whole operation I don't think does that much, especially because the Germans reinforce later, right? They get across the Straits of Messina, as you can see there at the top there, near the little toe of the boot of the mainland. They bring reinforcements in. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it worked as well as it's portrayed. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the nitty gritty about number of divisions and all that stuff and moving around. But yeah, I think it's a little bit, I think it's a little overblown. But other than that, yeah, it's not great. But yeah, so I think it's a bit overblown in that regard. And, I don't know. I don't think there's that many lessons for the future because they knew they were coming to Normandy, and the Germans still acted wrong, but they had the forces in the area. So anyway, so this is kind of giving you a sense of that map. I don't want to talk about everything because we're going to be covering topics with some live streams coming up. I'll release that stuff maybe tomorrow. Just got some other stuff to do. So I'm not going to talk about things like Asoro and Leon Forte because I'm going to have Mark Zuehlke coming on. So that's really cool to talk about that in depth from the research he's done about that, and kind of getting into some of those really, really interesting stories about those two actions because there's a lot going on there. But things like Agira, where the Canadian cemetery is today, and all of that is, as you can see there in the middle, because you can see Mount Etna here, which was technically the Canadian sort of objective towards the end here at Adriano. They eventually kind of get pushed out, as they say, right, of the line. So why that's so interesting is because they weren't really part of the plan, which I think is, it gets discussed and when Italy is talked about. I mean, more so from Canadian sources, talking about how the 1st Canadian Division, right, this is their first operation. This is their first combat for many of them, and first combat as a unit overall, right, and supported by the 1st Armored Brigade, as will happen throughout the fighting in Italy. But they're not meant to take a leading role in this, which is all interesting for all kinds of reasons, right? The sort of novice, no experience in combat. Montgomery's more or less given no choice. And that kind of goes back to what I was sort of chuckling about Norma's comment there a few minutes ago. Hold on, I need to find it. Because Norma makes me laugh. And yes, Canadian Airmen were delivering the airborne. Where'd you go, Nora? And yes, the RCR has lots of social media, and I think it's pretty good. Aha, here we go. So it looks like the Brits took a short straight line with a little sarcasm face. So the objective that Montgomery gives for the British units, particularly of 13th Corps, is secure Syracuse, which sounds weird when you say it that way out loud, to do that and then push up, which they do, mostly intact as a port, some of it, and then push up to where the operations, I don't know if you can really see it here, but it says 13th, 14th here for another airborne landing that takes place at Primasoli Bridge. However, what happens is the Germans are, like I said earlier, reinforcing Sicily, and one of them is airborne, and it's an actual airborne ops, one of the few that takes place after Crete, right? Everyone talks about that famous order from Hitler about how they're not going to do airborne drops anymore after high casualties at Crete. So they do some. They're not large by any means, but this one's enough to basically stall the advance outside at Catania. And the Catania plain, you can see there that it's white, so it's relatively flat. And then as it rises up to the west, what's sometimes called the Sicilian Badlands, and you can see that's where the Canadians and parts of the Malta Brigade, 231 or the 231st Brigade, is fighting up through the middle of there, along Highway number 12A, that shoots up the middle. So there's a whole bunch of issues there, right, that kind of come down to personalities, all kinds of issues with logistics. Kind of backing up a bit, the ship that was carrying the Canadian heavy equipment like carriers, trucks, and jeeps and all that stuff is sunk. And some Canadians die, about 50 from the Army, and some merchant sailors, are killed as a result of that U-boat attack. So they are without heavy equipment. So 8th Army in that regard is scrambling a little bit to figure out what to do when the thing sort of stalls at Catania. What do? You go around, right? I mean, I think I was talking to, I think it was Norma yesterday about the mainland, but same idea, right? You try to maneuver as best you can. The best for maneuver of any time, let alone during a war. So that's really, really, really interesting to me. So, and yes, sorry, I see this comment here. Sorry, I had the comments up top. I didn't see these. Yeah, most of it is. You can see here, right? The white is is flat or under, I think, roughly 200 meters. And then the darkest patches are over 1,400 meters. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of high places. Sicily, again, I said in that video, has been a place of fighting since recorded history. Really, that's been fought over there since stuff was written down. So it's full of strategic outlooks and castles of different time periods and fortifications and all kinds of stories and different rulers from all over the bloody place. So it's intense. Again, not my area of expertise, but it's really, really interesting that this is just another one that kind of takes place here in this long history of fighting in the Mediterranean. Yeah, I mean, go for a stroll. Yes, Rob. Go for a stroll around Etna's base. Well, I mean, Etna's that big, right? It doesn't quite give a sense here how big Etna is, but it does. That's why these paths are this way. That's the best way to get around Etna from the 78th Division, which comes in later, and the 51st Division, the British divisions here, are coming around. Etna itself on the push to Messina, kind of sometimes called the race to Messina, which isn't 100% accurate, but an interesting way of thinking about it, because, and one of those things I want to go back to yet again is what the plan is here. Right? There's an overall plan for Sicily, kind of lots of discussions about where to land, where's the best place to do it. Southeast is initially chosen, or sorry, is overall chosen. I mean, some of the other maps I have. Hold on, just give me a second here. You can see it when I get to it. I just don't want to throw too much at you at once. Is this one. So this is from a really cool source, actually, that I found. Yes, no Canadians during the Crusades, Chris. Or sorry, Phil. Yeah, they were busy not existing. So this one's the final one. It had some of the earlier ones about the plans, the advance lines, and all that kind of stuff. From the 7th Army had put together this report on Sicily and the lineup, the lead up to it and everything like that. It was a great source that I found. I can link for you guys to check out later. Was really helpful in making that video and finding these stuff. So it's fascinating. There's different plans. So overall, as you can see there at the bottom of this one in particular is, and again, these colors are different than the map I just showed. It's showing the Allied forces here in blue, and green is coastal troops. So those are Italians. And then you have the brown, which is kind of the mobile forces of the Italians for counterattacks. And then red is now German. As you can see, most of it here. It's really, really an interesting way of looking at that. So you have the different elements coming in to shore here on the southeast because it's wide or open and because of a lack of air assets. Sicily is brimming with AA, anti-aircraft weapons. Just so much. It's got so much. And when I did that lecture I was talking about really earlier there at the beginning, I had many questions about this because it was Canadian forces, right? So from all the branches, and some Navy people on the ground, some U.S. Navy as well, I believe it was, or could have been Australian Navy. I don't know. Somebody asked me, what's because I didn't talk about the Navy that much. And they're like, well, what's the Navy doing? And I'm like, well, there's not so much you can do, right? You can't see it on this one, but how close we saw it in the last one. Hold on, I'll go back. I know I keep flipping around, but we all love a good map, right? This one's actually pretty good. So you can just want to illustrate how close Messina is, right, to Calabria. And what's going on there, because it's just brimming with AA. So there's lots going on in that regard. And this one shows Etna too, why, how it's so big and why it's so hard to get around. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's a planning map. And that, like I said, that plan goes out the window very quickly. Yeah, that's just the last planning map that's included in the 7th Army report of what they were working on. But that's not what the plan was, right? The plan was to have the British units take the lead in the east, right? Catania wasn't supposed to be as difficult as it was. They thought, that wasn't a coup de main, which gets thrown around a lot when it comes to airborne. In that regard, I mean, I think that's what they were hoping would happen. But of course, you need the land advance, a lesson that somehow gets abandoned later on at Operation Market Garden. Who said that? To move forward to take Catania and the bridge to get over the river. And then get stalled, right? Because the Germans are now pouring in reinforcements, which they were not expecting. So they get held up. So you have this 1st Canadian Division that's never fought and is kind of a reserve, but not really. I think I saw a question earlier about Canadians being stalled by Italians wanting to surrender. No, that's not what happened. The stall kind of comes, sorry if I can find it. And if I miss stuff, guys, I'm sorry, I can go back later. But you guys are on all firing on all cylinders today. Because that was the issue was the lack of transport. And then also, what do you do with this force? Right, they're kind of shoehorned in a little bit. The Canadian government wants to get involved because I've talked about this many times on the channel. The Canadian Army's not really involved in the fight. They're doing other things, obviously. You have Hong Kong and you have Dieppe. That's it, right? That's the easy things to see in the press. That's battle gets talked about, combat gets talked about, right? If they're sitting in England supposedly doing nothing, it looks bad. So the Canadian government wants the Canadian Army to finally get in the fight. And this is what happens. But Montgomery's unsure of them, as Monty is wanting to do with new units, and kind of keeps them back. But then he realizes he doesn't have a choice. He's got to throw them in. So they're sitting back for a couple of days for lack of transport. They kind of cobbled something together at the last minute with, combing through units, basically stealing transport with 8th Army Command approval, and the other units are kind of confused, being like, what are you doing? You're taking our stuff here. So that's happening a lot. And then they eventually have to push up and through on the advance to take this inside route here on Highway 12A. And I think Andreas just asked about the infighting. Oh, before the invasion. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done too much on like the planning documents and all the fighting. I mean, I think that's pretty well covered a lot of other places. It's talked about, what they want to do, right? Americans don't want to even fight in the Mediterranean. They don't, but that's a huge thing, right? They want to fight in France. They want to go cross channel as quickly as possible. Churchill doesn't for all kinds of reasons. A lot of people argue connected to, protecting British Empire interests in the Mediterranean. So keeping the British presence up. I mean, you see that a little bit later with the Greek Civil War that takes place and getting British troops in there as quickly as possible. So I guess that's where people take that a lot from. Like Marshall doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to fight in Sicily. He wants to fight in France. So it takes some time and a lot of good British planning to kind of, as the British Army is still kind of good at, is getting those plans done and communicating those plans, I would say. And kind of not steamrolling or, railroading the Americans, but just coming prepared to the conference at Casablanca better than the Americans were, which is what it takes, right? Sometimes in inter-allied discussions and strategy meetings and things like that, the British just kind of overpower them with staff work, which is interesting. But that's really, really all I got. So that's kind of what I really know about that in those regards. So what I wanted to keep going, I keep distracting myself, and from the great questions, is this fight that takes place over the road network. I've seen some people already talking about here getting around Sicily is difficult. Particularly, even now, it's not the easiest. Back then, even worse. There's all kinds of discussion over, mule transport being used. Very hardly any roads. Mule passes, all that kind of stuff. Very hard to move through, particularly in the heat and when you're, hunkered down with gear going over these mountains. Not easy. So there's a issue, right? Again, going back to what I was talking about before, there's not really a defined clear role of what the whole American 7th Army is supposed to do. Again, this is my understanding of it. If I'm wrong, please tell me, because some people have lately said I don't like being told I'm wrong. So I'm telling you right now, if I'm wrong, please tell me, watching now or later. That's all I'll say about that. Is there's not really a clear role, right? They want them to hold the flank so that 8th Army can do its thing, take Catania, move up, get Messina. We call it a campaign. Clearly, Patton, who's in command, not his style to sit around and wait. Not a fan, right? Patton didn't like to sit around anytime, anywhere, no matter what. Well, thanks, Rob, for telling me I'm wrong. Get that daily dose of YouTube positivity. And so basically, Patton orders the troops that have landed. Right? There's some reserves that come in. He kind of cobbles together a corps that didn't really exist in the planning documents and says, just go. So they go west, get to Palermo. What is it, 72 hours, Palermo falls? Pretty fast. I mean, this says 22nd on it, but they're secured the area very quickly. It takes so quick to get up there and cut that side of the island off. Pretty much ending the campaign in that area. I'm not saying that there's not fighting, because there is, but in comparison to what's going on in the east and why the map looks the way it does. Sorry, I'm kind of doing the hand motions of the way of moving around. That's what's kind of going on here, right? You can see these American divisions coming over up in the north, which was not the initial plan. And these two arrows at the north here are landings that are done later and planned later, which are also the documents are included in that 7th Army report, which was a fascinating thing to go through. I wish I had more time to really sit and go through it in detail, but as you know, I have difficulties with time. Always something going on. So it's a really cool campaign, and then you have this fight over this road in the interior. It's assigned to the Canadians, but it's supposed to be an American road. And it's moved again because the attack changes, and Montgomery refuses to give it back to the Americans. So that kind of leads to some arguing this, at least, that this is why Monty and Patton didn't like each other. Fighting over control of a road, about wanting to advance into the interior of Sicily and kind of working their way over and around to Messina. So I think that's really an interesting way of looking at that, because you have a lot of interpersonal conflict. And why I focus on that, because I was at the staff college, right? So we're looking at higher level stuff, higher ranked people. I thought it was a really cool way of looking at that, because it doesn't really necessarily get discussed too much when, say, Canadians are looking at this. As you know, I'm trying to bring in different ways, all that stuff. So, and yeah, just going back, Dave, again, puts it really, really well. The plan changes once the resistance of the Axis adapts. So the shield is not necessary, right? You can't shield against nothing. So it's move and go and come around, which is what ends up happening, right? They do, 8th Army breaks through at Catania eventually, especially after kind of this left hook by the Canadians and the Malta Brigade kind of give the Germans no choice, right? Because they're trying to establish, I don't know, I'm doing it with my hands, you can't see that, a defensive line on Etna, right? The Etna line. That's what they're trying to do, is just hold on to this. And yes, Palermo is the capital. Someone said that. Yes, Monty and Patton did not get along. And yes, there are many other reasons, but that's one that I think is because their first real combat in theater reason not to like each other. Oh yeah, you're right. And sorry, yes, it's Highway 124. My eyesight is not great. And I was remembering something else. Yes. Norma's right here. They could have gone faster, but they slowed it down. The Americans were pissed. I kept calling it 12A. It's 124. Because, as you know, some of you don't know, I can't see very well far away. And I don't wear my glasses while streaming because I don't like to wear them if I don't have to. So that's probably why I thought that was an A. There. Personal insight on Brad, who is blind at things very far away. or even moderately far away. I can't see anything. Anyway, so that's really cool part of this is trying to figure this out, kind of not necessarily groping in the dark, but moving forward on what to do. Plans have to change. Enemy gets a vote, as is so often said. All that good stuff going on. Yeah, Monty got along with nobody. Yeah, that's fair. I'm surprised Monty got along with himself. Sorry, as Chris has already mentioned, it's very hot in Ottawa recently. Yeah, so it's really cool that the Americans are interested in this, wanting to move forward. Patton's obviously wanting to push forward and take Palermo, because I think Rob Crane mentions it's the capital. I mean, that's part of the Patton movie, which I'm sure many of you are thinking about. And right that, because that's included in the movie, is the Liberation, as it's called. In the movie of Palermo, it's called Liberation. And I think there was questions earlier. And sorry again if I missed it, because you guys are rapid fired today, which I love. About how with the Sicilians and how everything viewed the Allies. I mean, it's really interesting. We can move towards the east again, back to the landings, and this was included in that video. That the video that I put out about. Sorry, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, the Italian defenders. How there is not really. Sorry, I'm just. I'm just reading Dave's comments here. Before moving on, I'm going to go back to the highway because it's really interesting about how this all develops, because it's so vague. 7th Army is not really given an objective, which is weird, especially from an army group commander. Doesn't give an army an objective. It's kind of hang out here and blunt any counterattacks. But they don't expect the movements to be so fast, right? It happens so quickly, because the Germans figure out what's going on, and that's why the advance at Catania is blunted. And it's so interesting. I mean, the Americans run wild in the West fairly easily. Again, this is all relative. But you can see the advance. It's just Americans. So it's crazy how this happens. And again, you can see the development of the different units coming through. Back to the beaches, because I want to talk about the Italian defenders and things that I've read. And one of those accounts in that video, which I hope everyone checks out afterwards, because hey, Susan made it after picking up her dog. Woohoo! Thanks for joining us. He's a battalion commander in the I'm forgetting the regiment. Sorry, first division. So around Gallo. I forget the regiment. It's in the video. Sorry. He's walking on the beach, after the initial assault units have come through and done what they're supposed to do, clear the beaches. But there's still some pockets of resistance, and I'm using the word pockets of resistance very loosely. He falls into a hole in the beach because he can't see it, and falls into a hole with 2 machine gunners in it who are just waiting to surrender to anybody who comes along. And he's not the only one. I mean, there's lots of footage and photos of the Italians surrendering, just scores of them, so many of them. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just trying to take a look at the map here. I need to get close because I'm blind. I don't think Vizzini is on here. I could be mistaken, but I don't think so. I don't think it's on this particular map. Oh yeah, here it is. So you have Grand Michele, which is really the first Canadian fight against the Germans, kind of a rear guard, sort of a rear guard. It's kind of confusing, as a lot of this stuff is. They're not really sure who they're fighting until they figure out much later when they run into them at Valganera. So Vizzini is right here. So there's an issue here with moving the Canadians through up into this point and then connecting to that highway that I'm talking about and moving forward. Yeah, you're not really wrong there, Pete. Get off the beach and we'll figure it out. Kind of. So it's kind of a link up. Yeah, and this is a good way. Dave saying it here is the 1st Canadian Div and the 45th U.S. Div are green. So they're given easy tasks and they link up with each other. That's how Ragusa. So that's moving off the beaches. So again, there's minimal. Sorry, is there something going on here, guys? That I upset somebody? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting distracted. Par for the course with me. Sorry, guys, you know that by now. The regular viewers. Yeah, so there's very minimal resistance in that regard. I mean, the coastal, I mentioned that earlier, right, on that other map from the 7th Army, is there are coastal units, right? That's their job, is to hold the coastal defenses, which they hardly do. I mean, there is resistance. All that going. But then there's the units in the interior, particularly the armor, that do fight and fight well. I think somebody asked about do they not fight the here it is from Andreas. Did the Italians fight the British harder than the Americans? So much family ties to the USA. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I mean, Canada has a high, not as high as the United States, obviously, but it has Italian immigrants at this time, just like the United States. So I don't think it really plays into it that much. To be honest, I think they were just kind of done. Particularly the older guys, like literally older guys, older men, who are part of these coastal divisions. But those some of those ones that are using the mobile reserve are, some of them are hardcore fascists, are going to fight to the death. And that happens the entirety of the Italian campaign. Some Italians fight to the death. They believe in Mussolini and fascism. So they kind of get, and that tends to happen to fascists in war. They get killed, and a lot of them get killed and die fighting for their cause. So be it. But yeah, so I don't think it has anything to do with that. All that stuff. So yeah, it's really intense in that regard of those fascist units and things like that, especially when you get to the mainland, as the pullback starts to happen. Because another thing I discovered while putting together that lecture is the Germans basically are not supposed to be in command. It's supposed to be the Italians in command of Sicily. But the Germans just take over. And that includes the withdrawal, which I'll just talk about really quickly, through the Straits of Messina, which is a highly controversial topic, because the Allies are criticized for letting that happen. It happens a ton. Lots of criticism for all kinds of historians. Another one of my not so favorite historians, Carlo d'Este, does that as well. Already talked about him and his seemingly best Nazi friend, Michael Whitman, or what is it, Wittmann? I got yelled at again for not pronouncing his name correctly. Anyway, so that's part of this is they got out, right? And they kind of believe the Italians, because the Germans commandeer any sort of ferries, anything like that, to get their people out and kind of leave the Italians alone to do their own thing. So a lot of them get captured in Sicily. A lot of them want to get captured in Sicily. A lot of them will give up. But again, Dave is right as always. Usually, they write them out. They fight all the way through and are part of the defense at the Etna line and Messina and all of that. It's not an easy one for them as well. They fight hard in some cases. They just get written out of this story for German purposes, particularly after the war, which I'm not really here to talk about. Yeah, so maybe I should get a German lesson from Andreas. Whitman. So it is man, not men. Whitman. So man, not men. That's what I said in the video. What are people's problems? Anyway, I'm starting to take the approach of, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want in my videos, and they don't like it too bad. But you guys seem to enjoy, so here we go. So yeah, so that's really an interesting part that I discovered. And I mean, you hear about the evacuation all the time, but I didn't know that detail had happened. That basically, the Germans say, "Good luck, we're taking all your stuff," because these are Italian ferries, right? Because ferry service was normal between Reggio de Calabria and then to Messina, right, and back and forth between Sicily and the mainland. That's not a recent thing that's been going on during before the war as well. It's the only way to get there at the time, really. So it's an interesting element of this campaign that the Germans just sort of say, too bad. And I mean, that's kind of a precursor to what happens in September, right? On the mainland, when, the Italians surrender and lot of them get killed fighting the Germans. So anyway, not here to talk about that today. Maybe we can do something about that in September. But it's kind of an interesting precursor to that. So if there's anything else you guys want me to discuss in that regard, I can. But again, the campaign comes to an end mid-August. The dates differ. See 16th, 17th. Whatever, close enough. So the Canadians kind of get pushed out of the line here around Adriano, around the 8th of August, 6th or 8th, around the first bit of August there, and are taken out of combat basically and hold that position while the Brits kind of advance quickly up to Messina, while the American units are pushing ahead from the north and get there first. Again, this whole fight to get there first. So it's really, really interesting one. So I do have some questions, from Chris, who I believe is now watching. So just give me one moment. One second. Man, it's a warm one. Okay, so overall, how did the Canadians do? So that's an easy one to answer. No, they were, sorry, 1 second. Good times. No, they were not mattress thingies. They're just adapted rockets placed on landing craft. I think it's the LST. Yeah, or I can't remember. They have adapted landing craft with rockets on them. There's not as many as there are at Normandy, as far as I can tell, but they were there because it's included in the accounts. But that footage was Normandy. Yes, German I'm not good at all. Sorry. Anyway, yes, and Norma, it's a great name. I love it. I got that mug here as well. I didn't say I got my first OTD mug. If you want one, there's links in the store below, and it helps the channel, so please check that out. So overall, how the Canadians do? I think pretty well. I mean, I think the 1st Division does well to adapt. I think that's a really Canadian strength in the Second World War, is the ability to adapt. I mean, I saw it at Hong Kong in the accounts I went through. You see it in Sicily, so those are the first 2 major ones. Not so much Dieppe, just because there's not really a chance. I mean, when you're in a shooting gallery, there's not much you can do. But there's a lot of innovation in Normandy and learning on the job, but a lot of doing it well. And you see that again in Sicily with adapting to changes and terrain. And I'm just going to pop this up real quick because this is, I'm surprised it hasn't come up yet either, is Mowat's book. Here we go. And there's some links to books down below as well. If you buy them through those links, it helps me out with the channel. It's an interesting account of how that goes with adapting to changes in geography, right? I think probably the most harrowing part of No Bird Sing is the attack on Asoro and, climbing a sheer cliff in the darkness. I mean, these dudes aren't tall. They're not big men carrying all this gear, and they're, scaling a sheer cliff in the dark. And they're doing this really, really effectively, right? And getting that high ground at Asoro is massive. So it's really, really cool that they're able to do that. So I think overall they do well. They take some casualties, of course. That's going to happen. That happens in war. Obviously, the cemetery at Angura is evidence of that. So it's not perfect, because it never is perfect. But I think they do fairly well. They fill in for the role they're given. I'm sorry, I saw a question that I can answer very easily. No, Trent, I am not going to be talking about radar units in Sicily because I don't know much, if anything, about really radar units at all. Sorry. That's kind of your thing, not mine. I don't know too much about that. Sorry. Sorry, I get distracted. Oh, yes, back to Chris. Because he's a patron, and I like to do special things like for the patrons, which I'll talk about in a bit. I think overall they do well. Lots of lessons are learned. Armor as well, artillery, there's the lessons learned. All that good stuff. But what to do, what not to do, and moving forward. So next question was, were Canadian commanders who turned out were not up to snuff and were removed? No, there are none. Not that they were necessarily up to snuff, because I don't think it comes up in that regard. It's not like Normandy where you get time to do these kinds of things. But no, that doesn't happen until later. And of course, I think that comes from, you mentioned Simmons is got known for doing that. And even people he supposedly liked. Well, I mean, him and George Kitching were friends, but he boots him. So in Normandy. So you don't really see that yet. That happens later, and there's shifting of brigade commanders as well, moving around different brigades, different divisions, all that good stuff. But yeah, so that's really cool. So that doesn't come till later. Sorry, really cool. I'm just reading Trent's comments again. Yeah, sorry, I don't know much about radar. It's not my thing. I'm not technical. There's a reason why I became a historian. I can't do that stuff. Yes, and Alex is coming on, so we're going to have to save some for later to make you come back. But yes, no, Etna doesn't play a big role. I think Susan asked that in it, other than the geography of the volcano itself. I don't think there's an eruption until later in the war. There isn't at this time. But yeah, Vesuvius also goes up later. I thought Etna went up too. I could be mistaken. But it's just the geography of Etna that plays a role, as we saw on that map. Yes. So getting to Chris's final question. And again, if you have other questions, please fire away again. And if you already asked one I didn't get to it, please do it again. I'll try to go through what I can. But please fire away. And then Chris says here, obviously Simmons was in command of a 1st Canadian Infantry Division and later promoted, yes, to 2 Corps Commander. What about his brigades or other Canadian officers who say served in Sicily? So I looked at this earlier just to double check what I had known. The most famous one, and I mean, I use the word famous very loosely when it comes to Canadian commanders. It is, it's very niche knowledge, which is part of the thing of what I try to do is not make it so niche. I mean, we can go blue in the face talking about British corps commanders and American corps commanders and all that stuff, but even divisional commanders, but Canadians kind of get forgotten. His biggest name is Bert Hofmeister, right? Starts the war as the C4 CO and works his way through. Yeah, Norma said it as soon as I did. Bert Hofmeister goes from C4th. I mean, he's in charge of, I wrote it down. Or didn't I? I don't remember. I can't remember which brigade off the top of my head. That's going to be bad. I think he gets promoted to 2nd Brigade. Yeah, 2nd Brigade. I thought so. Which is C4 is a part of. 2nd Brigade, and then on to the 5th Division, which is an armored division. Later on, which fights in Italy. So, so that's the one. I mean, there's, like I was talking about earlier, there is some shifting going on with brigade commanders, but nothing major in terms of shuffling yet. So that doesn't come until much later. I mean, I think the Sicily campaign is so interesting. It's quick in general terms. So hopefully, sorry, real quick, hopefully that was, yes. Oh yeah, Vokes gets the promotion, which I don't think he should have got, but whatever. Sorry, very hot. What was I saying? I forget where I was. Yes, Vokes gets promoted. What was I talking about? Yeah, Vokes is not great. Vokes is, at this point, he is in charge of... he's in charge of 2nd Brigade. Yeah, and then gets promoted to Division Command. Yeah. Anyway, when did the Germans plan to begin the evac? Okay, so that's a bit disputed. 1 second here. I have the date. Because again, it has to go through Hitler, like all this stuff always does. Sorry, 1 second. I have to go through my notes. Okay, so the 7th, I have it the 7th written down of August in my notes. Oh yeah, and then 4 div. Yeah, sorry, going back to the question about promotions, but good in the sidebar. The 7th is when it happens because Mussolini is arrested. As the Sicilian campaign is ongoing, it's often thought that that's later. He's actually arrested first and then deposed as this is happening. And then the Germans are starting their plan to basically take over Italy and start to pull out of Sicily at that point with their more rearguard actions, right? Because Sicily is pretty much a rearguard action the entire time after the first counterattacks fail at Gela. Yeah, he would have got promoted, Sean, I believe. Anyway, yes, so that's when that starts to happen, right? They start to organize it because they bring them in after the landings, a couple days after the landings, moving troops down from the north, particularly the Fallschirmjäger, the famed Fallschirmjäger paratroopers. They come in later, and then they're going on. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean, Alex. Like it's every source I looked at said something different. But I just use the 8th to kind of Volk's. Sorry, I'll come back to this. Someone can answer that in the sidebar. That's what I mean. I had such difficulty pinning some of this stuff down because there's so many moving parts, and these accounts of guys who don't live through the war, so it's different stuff. And then this stuff is in German, which I don't read, so I don't have access. So it's a really difficult one to kind of pinned down, in my opinion. I don't disagree with you. I know it's earlier, but it's like August 8th is given as an order of an official retreat. I don't know if that's the date on the document saying, yeah, we're going, we're out of here. But I think they had been planning for this basically since the landing, or even before. Because like we saw in that one map, hold on, I can go back to it. Again, it's not the best quality, but you work with what you got, right? This one here. I'll just get my face out of the way so you can see it. Here is so you see port defensive areas, those circles, right? So that's Messina, the boot, and then Palermo, and then Syracuse, and Catania, which Syracuse doesn't hold, but Catania does. So that's part of that. So yeah, I think I don't know if it's I mean it's confusing. Again, I took that from I think an official history, the American one, I believe. So maybe it was a date on a document, but again, I'm not disagreeing with you. But again, I think after those counterattacks fail, as you can see here, particularly from the Hermann Göring division, and all of that from the Italians coming in, and I think after that is pretty much when it's onward, right? Because it's rear guard. It's I did pronounce it correctly. I wasn't sure if I pronounced Geller correctly. Yeah, I have trouble. Yeah, I think you're right there, Alex. I think that's the crux of that is it's broken. Yeah, it's pretty cool of how they're able to crack them eventually, right? When the Allies figure out, hey, is it Gela? So it's not Gela, it's Gela. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I think it's really interesting, Alex. I think you're right, but I'm not sure. I don't know for sure because I didn't do the primary docs on that one. Just using secondaries because I was doing an overview. Recommend source can help me understand the playbook. I understand this is a big subject. Yeah. And again, anybody in the sidebar has recommendations, fire away. I mean, I use so many different ones depending on what I'm trying to do. Again, it's old. Yeah, I'm not pronouncing Maltese names at all, Rob. Nice try. That's a language I don't think I'll ever understand. It's cool though. It's very difficult to understand. So depending on what I'm trying to do and how I'm trying to go about it, it's difficult to say one for sure. So if you're depending on what context you want, I guess is the best way to go about it. If you want to understand it, say from a Canadian perspective, it's old, but it's still good in that regard. Is the official history by Nicholson, and the other one's by Stacy because it gives you an overall view of how the Canadian story fits into this larger story. Because not every other book does that, right? Like Canadians, again, not trying to be, woe is us, but get left out in that regard because we're not seen as a strategic partner. In a lot of ways, they were not. Canadians were not involved in this stuff for all kinds of reasons. Some of it was their own fault. But to understand how Canada fits into this stuff, it's hard to say. I haven't read James Holland's book. Never got a chance. Just busy. But what are some of the other ones I use? One I use, but it's massive. Like, it's literally on the floor here because it takes up so much space. Hold on. I'm going to pull myself back up big here. As I like this one, Rolled at Arms. Yeah, it's a bit worn by Weinberg. It's massive, but it's old again, but it puts everything into context. I mean, if you're trying to use this for like little detail, you're up a creek. But if you want an overall story, it's literally everything, how it all fits together. And I've been using this one ever since I started my PhD. Hasn't really, done me wrong in that regard. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, if you want a Sicily focused one, I've heard James Holland's book's good. I don't have it. Never read it. I'm trying to think what other way to go about doing this. And then Tim Cook's book, I don't know if I linked it here, but I can after. He gives the combat experience, right? So if you want to fit that into it as well, it's not the playbook as you ask here, but it's gives a Canadian overview, right, of what they've gone through and all that stuff. And then you have the British official histories, the American official histories, and they have way more context for all kinds of reasons. Can't really go into it today about fighting over documents, that kind of thing, and just more money for official volumes. Sorry, I keep moving my camera. Having trouble focusing. So that's slow scan of my bookshelves. It's a bit of a mess right now because I need to get a new one so I can reorganize it all. Some books all over the place. I cleaned them up for a little bit and then they all went flying. So that's kind of how I think about it. I try to use as many primary docs as possible, right? Because that's what I do. That's what I was trained to do. So that's what I'm kind of leaning into. But that's the ones I like to use in that regard. That's probably not the best answer, but like you said, it's a big subject. It's complicated. It's affected by historiography and personalities and fun fights over nothing. But things reading about like Casablanca conference and all those conferences and stuff is a good way to do it too. But again, it's depending on who you're reading and how they're going about it is something you have to keep in mind. But Sicily is kind of a side note. I think that's an Italian helmet. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's a French style helmet. I don't think it's the Adrian helmet. I think it's an Italian style helmet. I don't know if it's an Adrian helmet that was given to the Italians, say in the First World War, and they were just reusing them. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure because that's what everything in the source documentation for that video or the footage was Italian prisoners. All it said is just Italian prisoners. So I think that's that. So these are the coastal divisions. Are they taken from the French? Maybe. I don't know. There's a little bit of Italian occupation of France, or they lived in helmets. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that by any means. But as far as I know, those are just Italian prisoners. Yeah, I know it gets confusing because there's been other ones like that too, where there's posted a snippet, I don't know how while back ago somewhere, of POWs coming, I think, from Sicily maybe to North Africa. And they look like French troops too. So it just adds confusion because North Africa, Vichy, Free France, just throw all that in there. And you're like, who is that guy? But it looked Italian to me, but I could be wrong. Again, not my expertise. We have the Italian military archives is on YouTube too, so maybe that could be a question for them, or maybe they've covered that. I don't know. If I find something after, I can link it down below. But it's a really good question, and that's a very fair question. Sorry, just jumping ahead. I don't think so, or no, maybe they were. I know they are later, like the Moroccans are used at Monte Cassino. But I don't think they're involved in Sicily. Answer that one. Oh, thank you, Sean. I really appreciate that. And I could start a book club if there's interest. If you want to, let me know. Sidebar, comments down below. We can definitely do that, and then we can get together in whatever form people want. So I'm trying to expand how I do things with OTD. And I want to talk about that a bit at the end. So stay tuned for that. Any other questions, please keep firing. Oh, yes, the sticker. I finally got my sticker too. Pretty excited for that. I don't know what to put it on because it's pretty big. So I'm just going to put it on the bookshelf behind me. Below is the tank that I got from the first Desires. That's actually made out of Holy Roller from London. Pete, for Pete especially. Woo, go London. And yes, the Radar Museum. I haven't been there myself. Lived in London for a good chunk of my life. Never went. Yeah. Okay, so there are French troops. There you go. There's your answer. I mean, the Free French stuff, there's just so many moving parts. It's hard to keep track. For me, anyway. Again, because it's not my expertise. So any other questions, fire away. I'm happy to answer them. If not, I can do my last little spiel. And if I missed anything, please fire away. I can just go back here. How many? Oh, here we go. The German evacuation. Let's see if I can find that in my notes. If somebody else has that number, that would be awesome. Sorry, real quick here. Just going through my quick notes. So German losses are not very high. I've got 60,000 troops evacuated. That includes wounded. Around 11,000 killed and taken prisoner. Yeah. So it's an interesting one, but again, I was having trouble nailing down a specific date number for any of this stuff. And I don't think too much equipment was destroyed. Some was, I mean, tanks especially, right? I talked about that at the beginning with our armored counterattack. They just get blown to pieces by naval guns. Talk about all you want of the strength of a tank. Shells come flying at you. It doesn't make a difference. It's going to lift you off the ground anyway. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but this isn't like a Dunkirk or something like that. Oh yeah, casualties are high. I'm not saying they're not high. It's just everyone always makes that talk about, the whole thing, because that's what Deste made his book about. It's all about how the Allies screwed up again, which was his thing. Yeah, so anything. Sorry, I'm just going through here. You like, book club? Nice. Sean's interested. Oh, surprising. Yeah, and it'd be open to anybody. So I don't know if that's what you're discussing here about being intimidated, but don't, because it's not how I do things. And I don't like that when people do that to other people. I hate that. So that's not what this would be. You could come and never say a thing or whatever, how we ever want to do it. So if you want to do it, again, leave a comment. On the sidebar, I'll go through it after and comment down below. Also, if you're still watching now, leave it there too, to maybe encourage some other people to kind of get talking. We can pick something easy at the beginning that's really accessible and go from there. I mean, this idea has been thrown around a lot, so we could do it in that regard. But okay, a quick wrap up for Sicily, because Alex's point. Yeah, okay, here we go. Yeah, so around 60, which makes sense because that's the numbers I saw, and the Italians around 50. That's a higher number than I saw, but again, my sources were not great. And they were fairly close to the time of the war, so not everything had come out of the woodwork, so to speak. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've seen. So overall, always a discussion, right? Was it worth it? I think so. I mean, for even the strategic factors, right? Opening up the Mediterranean, getting Italy out of the war, so to speak, because they do surrender after Sicily's taken, and that's a big impetus of why they're able to, why it starts that process of them leaving the war. This all starts with Sicily when everything starts to fall apart. So I think that's a big part of it, and holding down German troops in Italy. You can discuss that until we're blue in the face if that's the right thing to do, because I don't think you can separate Sicily from the mainland, because it's kind of groping in the dark, and how that goes. Kind of figuring this out as we go. But yeah, I think it's necessary even just from the strategic point of view. But yeah, so if that's it for questions, we got a few here. Yeah, and that's true too. Is that I made this? Well, actually, that's funny because you make that point because I completely agree with you. I made that point in a paper a long time ago in undergrad, and the TA ripped me to shreds, saying that doesn't make a difference. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Troops are troops, right? Especially when you start losing a bunch, you got to do it. Particularly in the Balkans, because I made that point about the Balkans, right? Because the Italians are garrisoning a good chunk of the Balkans at the time, and we all know how that war goes, right? With Tito and there's a whole civil war light kind of thing going on, but there's also holding down huge numbers of German troops being fought directly. So it's really cool in that regard on how they were able to do that, and I think it's Italy's departure from the war because of Sicily plays a role in that. And yeah, that's a lot of troops. That's just a lot of troops. That's just a lot of people. So it doesn't really matter in that regard. So Germans aware of no. That's where the mincemeat thing comes in. So that's one good element of mincemeat, I guess, is they don't know. But again, I don't argue it doesn't really matter because once they know it's Sicily, they just go all out and start, throwing units in there. And not technically, Kesselring is not in command yet. Like I said, it's an Italian commander whose name I forget. Not preaching what I practice here about knowing more about the Italians, which I should, but I didn't highlight that in my notes. I had it written down, see if I can find it. And I'm just terrible with pronunciations, as you guys know. I'm trying to get better, trying to work on them. I don't remember the name of the commander, of the Italian army commander, like the army that is Sicily. Don't remember off the top of my head. But yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a lot. Okay, I think I might have missed. Oh, yes. So were the Canadian forces involved in Husky also involved in the mainland campaigns? Yes. We have 1st Division, 1st Infantry Division, right? I don't have the map up. That is augmented with the 1st Armored Brigade. That is Canada's contribution to Italy for a good chunk of time until 5th Division, 5th Armored, gets online. And that takes a while. That's not until much later. So that's the bulk of the Canadian contribution from the Canadian Army. And then, of course, you have RCAF squadrons involved in Italy as well that were, North Africa, but I don't want to talk about that because Alex is going to talk about it later. You'll have to come back. But yeah, so that's how you see it, right? Is 1st Division is Italy until they go to France as a result of Operation Goldflake, where the Canadian forces are pulled out of Italy and sent to join 2 Corps to put 1st Canadian Army back together, so to speak. Big political debate about that in Canada when the decision is made to send 1st Division. Are they just going to do Sicily? Are they going to keep going? Nobody knows until they just kind of just go with it. And they kind of become such an integral part of 8th Army in mainland that they can't really pull them out without causing a big brouhaha with their British ally. So that's why they don't do that. Until they can, when they can get more forces and they're trying to wind down Italy anyway, broadly speaking. So they're able to pull 5th and 1st out, 1st Canadian Corps, and send them to Northwest Europe. Yeah, I mean, there's not much good single volume history. That's why, I'm sorry who was asking earlier about the books. Sorry, I'm blanking on your name. Please repeat your name. Sandra. Well, I couldn't really give a good one to Sandra because I'm not going to suggest a terrible book that I don't like, that I don't think is well done, and I don't think Este's book is well done. But I haven't read James Holland's book, so I probably should. But I'm shifting my focus soon. Yes, and they stage in Sicily. Here we go. General, God, do we have an Italian speaker? General Guzzoni? That sounds somewhat vaguely correct. Anyway, so yeah. Yes, but Ellenbrook being correct. Yes, and there's lots of interesting, and that's why I think Norbert saying is interesting, because talking in sidebar there, I can see about interactions with Sicilians. I think it's a really interesting part of this. Did they really happen? I don't know. Did Mowat meet them? Probably. Did it go the way he said? Probably not, but it's interesting. You get his sense of how it was like, so maybe you can take it from that aspect. But anyway, we'll get to Zoni. I have to learn like several different languages to do this correctly. Do Canadian senior officers have the ability to say we're drawing from 8th Army if they wanted to? Technically, no. Even from the Canadian context, no. That is it's hard to say. No. My gut says no. That's not happening. It's the Canadian government that has the decision to do that. So if the Canadian government says we're done, right? They'd pull them out, no problem, right? That would happen. But then you set off a whole chain of things. But it would be more of an alliance thing. I don't know if the Brits would see it as an alliance thing, more as the Dominions not listening again. The Canadians would have seen it as more of an alliance issue as equals. I don't think the Brits would have seen it that way. But technically, yes. Legality, yes. They could have said Canada says we're done. We don't want to fight in the war anymore at all, and declare have their own peace treaties with Germany and Italy and Japan if they wanted to. They could have. They didn't, but they could have. Technically, and then practicality, no. I don't think that was going to happen anyway, shape, or form. It's just not how it went. But yeah, it's a whole thing along with that, and it's more complicated, right? Because you have usually the top, and again, this is not official in any way, but usually the top Canadian commander in theater, where am I? In theater is kind of the ambassador of Canada, is kind of de facto commander of it all. So like First Corps commander would have been like the Canadian ambassador in that particular theater. And they were the ones who would be in touch overall up top, right? Still reporting to 1st Canadian Army. But in this different structure and hierarchy, things can change, right? Because I'm thinking of the First World War context, right? Where this comes from. Because Currie threatened to do it multiple times in the First World War. If you don't let me get my way, I'm going to go to Ottawa and we'll see what happens, right? So was he supposed to be doing that? No. In this sort of hierarchy of things, doesn't mean he didn't threaten it. You don't really see that in the Second World War in that regard. But it was just something that was on the table, right? Canada had independence of action through the entire conflict. They declared war on their own. They didn't have to. They could have not done anything, but they didn't. So it's a bit different in that regard. Yes, and 1st Canadian Army is in Northwest Europe and the Netherlands. That's a February 45 after the stuff in the Bulge ends, and then kicking off into Operation Veritable. Yeah, Canada was always pushing for a Corps headquarters for a long time, but they didn't. Also, the federal government didn't want to get more troops involved because King never wanted to because he feared conscription. That's why they put an armored division together, because it was less troops, less people to die. No, it never was going to be a Canadian Army in the Med. Never. No, nothing is ever straightforward, Phil. Nothing ever. All right, T-Pat, thanks for joining us. Sorry if I missed anything here. Yes, and that's the issue, is why it waits. That's why it takes so long. They didn't want it to take so long until February 45. They wanted to do it earlier, but they couldn't get out because, again, that's a strategic issue, going back to the earlier discussion on the books and stuff. It's all about shipping, right? That's a major issue for the Allies. All over. Yeah. So sorry, yes, Norman asked me that question again. Okay, so first, no, technically not. Dieppe is first, technically, on the European mainland. But this is the first major sustained campaign for Canada in the war, really. Is Sicily, right? Dieppe's 1 day, Hong Kong's technically 17 days. It's not even a full brigade. Yeah. Anyway. Yes, you're not wrong, Pete. But hey, sometimes it works when you got to do what you got to do. Okay, so I'm hitting too many things. A little bit involved. I mean, there's Canadians all over the place, as I like to say. But yeah, there's some Canadian merchant ships involved. But they're mostly engaged in the battle and cross Atlantic convoys. Anyway, so what's coming up? So a few ideas I've had, a few things I'm throwing around for just in kind of the short term. One that came to me yesterday, I can see what I can do, is because the movie that's coming out soon about Robert Oppenheimer, Manhattan Project, Trinity tests, all that stuff. Because the footage of the Trinity test is available in public domain for use on the U.S. National Archive website. So I was thinking of putting some of that together, because when people think of Oppenheimer, they think of that famous little, I don't know if speech is the right word, it's more like a quote of him talking about his reaction to seeing the bomb go off for the first time. And he's that stark, zoomed in on his face, his black background, black and white. He's all solemn, sad looking, being like, we all thought about, some people cheered, some people clapped, and some cried, blah, blah, blah. As you can tell by my tone, I don't believe him. I think he's lying outright. I think he's changes, because that happens later. I don't remember exactly when that clip is from. I had to get ready for this while I was doing the digging. So I want to look at that. Is that what he actually thought? Is that what the documents say? Because I read books when I was doing my PhD that said none of that was true. He cheered. Someone who was standing next to him, I got to find that book because they wrote a book about it, cheered the bomb going off. So this whole solemn, I'm death, destroyer of worlds, blah, 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 is just not seemingly true. He spends all this time and effort into putting this stuff together, and then when it works, he's all sad about it while the war's ongoing. It's BS. So anyway, I want to do some digging, see what I can find connected to Oppenheimer and things going on at the time. So that's kind of what I got planned. I'm going to do a video. I have become death. Sorry. Sorry, I just want to make sure. So that's what I want to do for that. So that won't take too long because I want to get that out well before the movie comes out, which is on the 21st, I think. So soon. What else? Oh yeah, Special Service Force. I kind of teased it on Twitter and other social media outlets. Oh, which by the way, I am on. Oh yeah, Susan. Yeah, you've been to literally ground zero there. Yes, that would be much appreciated, Susan. Well, we need to exchange emails for something else, but we'll talk after. I teased it a bit on social media, which by the way, I'm on Threads now, because if you will follow me on Twitter, which I just hit 10,000 followers, which is pretty cool, but it also sucks because of what's happening there. I'm on Threads now, which is the Instagram equivalent of Twitter. So if you want to go on there, I'm on there too. I don't do the daily post there because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with all this new stuff and moving forward. And yeah, Devil's Brigade, I need to rewatch that movie. But I'm gonna probably watch the movie first. I don't know. We'll see. I have to think about it. I already started collecting documents for that one. So so that'll be a cool one. That one's gonna take some more time because I really want to get into that one. Because it's a really interesting story of Canadian-U.S. cooperation at a crazy level. Because I teased it in the video on Lend-Lease, right, about Canadian-U.S. cooperation and what that looked like, right? Because Canada is not ever technically part of Lend-Lease, technically. Yes, they are. I mean, they're not getting Lend-Lease. They're contributing to Lend-Lease. Anyway. So yeah, I want to look into that. And I'm going to watch it, Scott. I know, but I'm going to do it. Come on, it's got marching in it with bagpipes. That's fun. And I'm going to have to, every time I do anything, I've got to deflect the popular culture stuff, right? So that's what I'm trying to do there. So that's kind of the short term for now. I'm kind of in between other projects, so I have a little bit more time. Well, my plan isn't to critique the movie. It is the best scene. Nicholas, it's the best. I think the rest of the movie is not good. I'm not going to do a critiquing the movie. I'm probably not even going to mention the movie. I want to, as I kind of did with Market Garden, which the video didn't go as well as I'd hoped, is look at what else is out there and try to fill in some gaps. So trying to do that. So I'll see what they've done, what they haven't done. Yeah, so I want to dig into that, and then of course make primary docs the base of all of this as what I'm trying to do as part of my OTD stuff. Is I think I'm going to use that as my base moving forward of what differentiates me is the primary docs, because that's what I'm trained to do. That's what I bring, and a lot of people don't. No criticism. I'm not criticizing other channels because a lot of them do amazing work, and some of the primary docs don't even exist, right? Like I'm talking like really long ancient stuff. There's lots of great ancient stuff on there. Like Kings and Generals is one of my favorites, and they do amazing things. And some of the stuff there's just no primary documents because it's from something else or it's through another whatever people, society, culture, whatever. Yeah, so that's part of it. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. So where did Norma go? I think you asked about how do you guys are flying here? Oh yeah, what else? Any live streams with guests? Yeah, so we have Alex coming on. Who's maybe still watching. I don't know. He's probably working, as he should be. Alex is going to talk about air power and Canadian air power, Sicily. Going to have Mark Zuehlke on next 2 weeks. I don't have the dates yet. I got to still do all that prep for that. I don't have the dates off the top of my head. I was on vacation last week, still getting back into the flow of things. Mark Zuehlke is going to come on talk about the Leona Forte, which I'm really excited about to dig into those, really get down into the micro level, which I'm really excited about. And then Dave Gribstad, hopefully as well. I'm going to touch base with him on this at some point. We'll talk about the RD before the end of the campaign. Right, I'm trying to not do it like a Sicily week, trying to broaden it to cover whatever bit and fit everyone's schedule, but still try to have it within the parameters of today through the first bit of August there. So it'll be at some point in that window because Dave's had a new role in defense and job and big promotion. So I don't poke him. But yes, so that's all that's planned as of now. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. First special first. Like maybe I can conclude that, but I would say, yeah. I mean, you've got Kiska, mainland Italy, Anzio, French Riviera, and then disbandment after training in Montana and Vermont or New Hampshire. Vermont. They are all over the bloody place, and that doesn't mention where the the troops came from, right? Because they were recruiting from all over the place, from different places. Yeah, so it's really cool. And yeah, I mean, for special service, for battlefield tours, the French Riviera. It's the only warm, nice place that you can go with these, stereotypical tourist destinations that are doing Canadian battlefield tours, other than, some European farm field somewhere. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've got planned for the short term. One quick thing I do want to talk about, though, because I teased this a little bit, because I just got back from a couple of times, just visited family, some time off. And I've mentioned this to my patrons. Oh, hey, George, coming in hot. Yes, I know. Dave, I gotta pronounce it correctly. It's Asoro, not Asoro. I know. Anyway, gotta focus. So back on that, I told my patrons that I'm gonna do some kind of reflection on OTD and all of that. So I've been working on that, and one of the big projects, I'm sure most of you already know this, but is my biggest project ever that I have planned. If you will spare me a few minutes, don't leave yet, so I can talk about this. Well, except for Nora, you already know about all this. Go walk the dog. Is Canada and Normandy. That's what I want to do for next year. That's my big plan for the 80th, is to do that. And what that means is I got to go back. I haven't been since 2016 when I went with Dave. I was a student doing a battlefield tour. Dave was leading it and did an amazing job. And it was a tour, so I was like, bang, 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 bang. So I want to go back on my own and cover this stuff. Go to these locations. Cover them all as much as possible. That's what I'm trying to do. So I need help with that. And the one thing I do need help with is a few more patrons. So I am at 72 as of today, I believe, maybe 71. My goal is to get as many as possible. But I'm thinking of starting a campaign to support this project by getting to 100, like having a goal as 100 patrons. I think that would be good. It would give me a little more backup to get this thing moving, because I got to get over there myself, and then there's cost related with getting around and all that stuff. So that's kind of a big thing I'm going to start to push, is getting focus on this Normandy project a lot while working in things in between. and other stuff I have to do. And I'm going to need some help with that. So as many more patrons or YouTube channel members, like Brody, thank you so much. I really appreciate the support because I need as much as I can get. That would be a great way to do that. And it doesn't have to be much. You can do a couple bucks and it makes a huge difference. And yeah, thank you, Brody. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Very, very helpful. Thank you. Those make the big difference. Memberships, super chats, stickers, whatever your preferred method is. Pete handed me an envelope with some money in it. Maybe a GoFundMe, but if you don't reach your goals, they don't give it to you, right? So, and I think there's other like limitations and things like that. So, but something to think about. Yeah. So that's a good idea. I just need help getting the word out because I'm just not very big as opposed to other names out there. There's just some big names out there that get a lot of attention. Again, I'm not saying this in a mean way, but it's just the way it is, right? I'm just me. This is the setup. You see it all the time. This is OTD Central of my office. This is what I'm trying to do. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to set up for that, and I think it can happen. I don't see why it couldn't. I'm trying to be as frugal and strategic. I want to say, Regiment just said set goals realistically. I don't think 100 patrons, maybe say total between YouTube channel members and patrons is unrealistic. I don't think so. I've seen people do it on other things. Yeah, I could do something with Woody. I mean, everybody takes a cut, Dave, but I think GoFundMe does it at a different level. You have to hit a certain thing, and then I'm not sure the percentages. Patreon's the best one. They take not that much, and it's reliable. I haven't heard any issues from, say, the supporter side, creator side. It's fantastic. Make things so much easier for me, and all of that stuff. So yeah, maybe I can talk to Woody. I got to talk to Woody about something else anyway. So I know he's busy with the launch of World War I TV, which is great. If you haven't checked that out, go do, because they've already started some stuff. I watched the one with Gary Sheffield that was on the first. I just watched it today because I was away last week about First Day on the Somme and kind of that campaign. It's fantastic. Gary's been on this channel. He knows the stuff. So with that said, if we meet up in Envelope, we'll have another. If we meet up in Hamilton, I'll have another Envelope. Thanks, Pete. I'm not sure about my current travel plans other than that, but I will keep people posted in places. And yeah, and also patrons get stuff, right? I'm going to be doing lots of insider stuff on this, probably starting soon with what I'm working on first. Because I do want to give everything its due as best as possible. So I think I want to cover the services, right? I can do the Navy now. Water's water. I don't need to go to the channel to do that. You know what I mean? So all that good stuff. So if you can support in whatever way you can, I know not everyone is in a financial position to do so. Trust me, I get it. I've been there more times than I care to admit. Or yeah, so there was a lot going on before, and it was not great. But so I know I get it. But the one thing you can do the Navy now, I know. Well, you can help me, Rob. Another way you can help is watching the videos, turning on the ads. That helps a lot. It's not a ton, but it's something, right? Anything. Flights are expensive, yes, but any little bit I can just dump into that, the pot gets me my ticket. Like that's the biggest one, and getting around. So that's what I'm like working towards, right? Like that's what I'm trying to scrimp and save for all this stuff. Is getting there. Literally getting to these places, because it's been a while since I've been there, and I know some things have changed, and I want to, dig into some stuff, not literally, but get into some different stuff. But yes, I am planning to go well before the 6th, early April, actually, to give myself lots of time to finish stuff up before the anniversary comes, and then release throughout the campaign is the plan. We'll see how it goes, depending on the level of support the campaign has. The more support it has, the better it'll be. That's just the long and the short of it. More patrons, more YouTube channel members, the better it's going to be. So anyway, yeah, it's not cheap. I mean, you don't fly to Normandy, right? You fly into Paris, and then you have to get your way up there. I'm not sure how I want to do that yet. I think I'm going to have to rent a car. I don't think I have a choice to get to the places I want to get to, because it's just sometimes it's in the middle of nowhere, right? So to speak. I don't think Woody has space for me, and I don't want to impose on him. I know he's so busy. Anyway, I don't know. I don't have a number yet. Maybe I should figure that out, and that'd be a good way to do it, right? So that it has accountability, which as it should. I was going to do that today, actually, is kind of dig into this and see what it's like. It's a bit out yet, so things might get a little higher. Who knows what's going on with all that kind of stuff. The dollar sucks. Our dollar is terrible. Maybe it'll get better. I don't know. Our exchange is awful. I don't like it. But yeah, so it's how much I see 800 Canadian, so it's Canadian. So doing that kind of stuff. Moulin Moran. Okay, yeah, maybe a Moulin Moran. I was thinking of an Airbnb somewhere. Yeah, Government of Canada has some support, but I have to dig into that a little bit. That's another thing I was going to do when I got back from my vacation, which is now. Maybe take the ferry. I think that'd be kind of cool, right? Because you're kind of recreating it. I've thought about that. I'm not sure yet. I need to figure out all this stuff, but I'm sure Woody will help with promotion if I want to talk about it. No problem. Or come on this channel to drag some of his good people over here, because a lot of them already are here. But you guys are awesome. But yeah. Yeah, when I do try to acknowledge as many people as I can, Susan. Some people don't like to be acknowledged. So I just do whatever somebody wants. I mean, when you become a patron, I usually give a social media shout out. So if someone says no, I don't. So yeah, that's why it usually takes a bit, because I want to give them a chance to read over everything and be like, he's going to get a shout out and I don't want one. But yeah, it's going to be a huge part of it. Like if you want your name mentioned in the project, you'll be on every episode. All of that stuff. Yeah, Osterheim, I know about the ferry there. Osterham, whatever. I know about all that. It's cool. Thank you. Sorry, I'm mixing things in my head here. I haven't figured out what that's going to look like, but I could do a huge thing about the supporters, which patrons already are, and YouTube channels already are in support of this project, because that's a good chunk of what this is going to come from. And people can do one-offs if they like, PayPal, whatever. So that's the big thing. That's the big thing upcoming. That's going to be taking up a good chunk of time, so the videos might drop off a little bit. I'll try to do little chunks here and there. Maybe some stuff that I find that might not say fit. I can do some videos with that. Oh yeah, I know, Pete, they take forever. A lot of them are closed currently for their applications, so I have to double check all that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, so if you can support, that would be great, because crowdfunding is a great way to do this, and if I can do it with just your help, right, it gives us also flexibility, and we can do whatever we want. If I have to follow a bunch of grant rules, it's not the same. You know what I mean? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you understand what I'm saying. So yeah, so there's going to be a lot of primary research into that. I will share as much as I can. I will get like war diaries, letters, anything. I will share them with everybody who's supporting. Anyway, I was going to do another video on that. I do a short little trailer. Maybe I'll do like a 3 to 4 minute other video to do that, and then kind of kick off a campaign with a number once I've kind of got that figured out. Anyway, other than that, thank you everyone who's contributed today. The new YouTube channel members, or member Brody, thank you. Much appreciated. And the super chats, they are fantastic. Other than that, there's some links down below. Check those out. Watch the video that I haven't. If you haven't yet, check it out below. And I want to get those numbers a little pumped up. That helps as well to get the algorithm moving. So that's in your rental car. I would do that, no problem. I'll wear them on my shirt like a jersey. No problem there. But yeah, if anyone, all joking aside, if anyone knows anyone who's maybe looking for a sponsorship, I'm open to it. I've had some companies reach out, but they're sketchy, so I said no. I'm not going to mislead people. So that's why I'm kind of floating along still, because I said no to a sponsorship deal. Take that for whatever you want. They were sketchy, so I said no. Anyway, thanks everyone. The sidebar is amazing. I'm going to literally have to go through that with fine-tooth comb to get all the great things out of it. But again, all those questions and stuff I asked about maybe what you want to see, the book club especially, please let me know. That won't be any charge for anything like that. We'll figure that out. Other than that, everyone have a good rest of your Operation Husky day. Launching Operation Husky Pacino Day for the Canadians. Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. Sorry. One quick thing, and I'll do this other outlets to get really a good idea of this, is OTD regular AMA. Let's get that moving. People have said they want that, so let's get that figured out and how we can do that. Let me know, and especially in the comments down below, let me know about that if you want that. So other than that, I will see you next time for when I think Alex is on first for that. So we will see you again, back talking about more Operation Husky. So I'll see everybody later.